I always believed that family was supposed to be the one place where you didn't have to fight for space, respect, or belonging, but somewhere along the way, mine stopped feeling like a sanctuary and turned into a place where I constantly felt drained emotionally, mentally, and now financially. My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one in the family who worked the hardest yet received the least appreciation. While my parents and siblings always seemed to expect things to fall into place for them, I was the one hustling through double shifts mornings at the bookstore, evenings at the cafe trying to save a little money of my own. So when my mom suddenly announced her idea of a family healing trip to Florida, I actually allowed myself to feel hopeful, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe I thought this was the moment things would change. Maybe this trip would give us a fresh start, or at least give me a chance to feel included. The planning began with excitement, but the tone shifted quickly. One afternoon, as we sat around the kitchen table, my mom let out a heavy sigh that I immediately recognized as a setup for a request. She glanced at my dad with a look that said they'd already discussed this. "Emily, you know things have been tight for us lately," she began, her voice soft and controlled, the way she always sounded when she wanted something. "Would you mind covering the groceries for the trip?" "Just the food. We'll handle everything else." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I hesitated, but after a moment I nodded, because I'd been conditioned to fill in the gaps, to be the responsible one, the helper, the reliable daughter who always did what she was asked. "Sure, I can help," I said, ignoring the sting of disappointment. Over the next week, I spent $740 of my savings money. I'd meticulously put aside for myself buying everything they requested: snacks, breakfast items, drinks, frozen meals, fruit, coolers, ice packs, and specialty items my siblings wanted. I did all the heavy lifting, too. I loaded the groceries into the SUV myself, packed everything neatly, and even woke up early on the morning of the trip to organize the coolers so nothing would spoil. I felt proud, in a strange way, believing that perhaps this effort would finally earn a thank you or even a sense of closeness. I was wrong. When I walked into the living room with my suitcase that morning, expecting we'd all head out together, I froze. My parents and siblings were already gathered by the door, bags packed, shoes on, the car keys swinging from my dad's hand. They looked startled to see me ready. My mom cleared her throat, her expression shifting into the familiar mix of guilt and justification. "Emily," she said, her voice too gentle to be sincere, "we need to talk." In that moment, the air felt heavier, almost suffocating. Because I knew that tone too well, it meant they had decided something, and it wasn't in my favor. She stepped closer, placing her hand on her chest like she was bracing herself for delivering bad news. "We talked last night," she continued slowly, "and we think it's better if you sit this one out." My mind went blank. "Sit this one out?" I repeated, my voice barely more than a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "I packed. I paid for the groceries. I did everything you asked." My dad stepped forward, arms crossed, trying to look authoritative. "You've been stressed lately," he said flatly. "We don't want any tension on this trip. We want peace for once." I stared at them, the reality sinking in like ice water spreading through my veins. This wasn't about my stress. This wasn't about peace. This was about convenience for them, not me. "So I'm good enough to pay for the food," I said slowly, each word trembling with disbelief. "But not good enough to come?" My siblings shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. That told me everything. They had all agreed to this. My mom reached out, trying to soften the blow, but her words only made it worse. "We'll bring you back a souvenir," she offered, like that would make up for the $740 and the betrayal. I felt something inside me crack not a break but an awakening. I wasn't part of their plans. I was just the support system, the resource, the person they used because it made their lives easier. Before I could say anything else, they walked past me, brushed by me like I wasn't even standing there, and left through the front door. I followed them outside, still shocked beyond comprehension, and watched as they loaded the last of their bags into the SUV, All the groceries I paid for were neatly stacked in the back. They didn't even leave me a cereal bar. Dad started the engine without looking at me. Mom gave a tiny wave. "We'll be back in a few days," she said. And then they drove away, leaving me standing barefoot on the driveway with my suitcase beside me and my heart sinking in my chest. The neighborhood was quiet except for the fading sound of the engine. I stared at the empty street, feeling humiliation, hurt, and anger building in waves so strong they left me shaking. They had taken my money, my effort, my hope, everything, and still decided I wasn't worth bringing along. But as I stood there in the silence of a house that suddenly felt too big and too empty, something inside me began to shift. The sting of betrayal didn't break me. It awakened me. I realized in that moment that if they could treat me like this after everything I'd done, then maybe it was time I stopped being the person who made sacrifices for people who never appreciated them. And as the anger rose, sharper than my heartbreak, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of my revenge. After they drove away with my money, my groceries, and not even a backward glance, I walked back inside the house in stunned silence, sat on the couch and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour, letting the humiliation sit heavy in my chest until it slowly transformed into something sharper, something colder, something that felt like clarity. For the first time in my life, I truly understood how my family saw me, not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as someone whose presence mattered, but as a resource, a convenient wallet, a workhorse, a background character in their story who is expected to give and give without ever asking for anything back. And the more I replayed their words and their excuses, the more something inside me hardened. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was done. If they wanted to exclude me, if they wanted to make decisions without me, if they wanted a vacation without my stress, then they would get exactly what they claimed they wanted, just not in the way they imagined. My revenge began with something simple, my laptop. I opened my Airbnb account, the same one my mom had begged me to use, just temporarily because she couldn't remember her password, the same account through which the vacation house had been booked. Under my name, with my deposit, with my card, I stared at the reservation page for a long moment, my finger hovering over the button, feeling the power shifting quietly but completely into my hands. And then I clicked cancel reservation. The screen refreshed, and within seconds, a notification popped up. Refund issued, $482. Straight back to my account. I sat back against the couch cushions, feeling the smallest, coldest smile pull at my lips. That was step 1. Step 2 was even easier. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the long list of recent grocery purchases, snacks, drinks, frozen meals, breakfast kits, fruit, chips, sodas, specialty items my siblings demanded. Everything totaling $740. I had paid every cent. And then I remembered something, the supermarket. I used most often offered refunds within 48 hours for unopened items if you brought the receipt. Guess who had the receipts? I did. Guess who had the groceries? My family did. And guess who was halfway to Florida with a car full of items they hadn't touched yet? Also my family. So I grabbed my purse, my receipts, my car keys, and drove straight to the store. The customer service worker looked at the receipts, scanned them, and checked the policies. Everything matched. Everything qualified. And one by one, she processed refund after refund. When she handed me the final receipt, the amount stared back at me like the universe itself was giving me a nod. $740 returned. Between the Airbnb and the groceries, I now had every dime they took from me. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was realizing what they were about to walk into. Because with the Airbnb canceled, they were officially on their way to Florida 7 hours away, with no place to stay, no food, no backups, and no idea what was waiting for them. I drove home, poured myself a cold drink, and imagined the moment they would pull up to the Airbnb they believed they handled. I imagined them trying to unlock the door. I imagined them checking the app and seeing the bright red word, canceled, I imagine the look on their faces when they realized they had no groceries, no beds, no plan, and absolutely no way to reach me. Because once I stepped inside my house, I put my phone on silent and turned off notifications. I let the peace of that decision wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. The next morning, my phone practically vibrated off the table from the number of messages they sent. My email dinged with an all-caps message from my mom. "Where is the Airbnb?" "It says canceled." "What did you do?" Immediately after, a text from my dad. "You're paying us back for this mess." Then my sister chimed in. "Just fix it. This is your fault." Their entitlement didn't shock me, but it disgusted me. It was almost funny how easily they flipped the situation, how quickly they expected me to clean up the disaster they had created by excluding me. I let them panic for 3 full hours, sipping my coffee, scrolling through my apps, enjoying the serenity of knowing that, for once, I held every piece of power in this story. Then, when I finally decided they'd stewed long enough, I sent one email, just one. No long explanations. No apologies. No justification. Just the truth written as cleanly and coldly as the betrayal they had handed me. I simply exercised my right not to participate, just like you told me to. I hit send and watched the message leave my outbox. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. There wasn't hesitation. It was realization, the moment they finally understood exactly who they had underestimated, exactly what they had taken for granted, and exactly how wrong they had been to treat me like I was disposable. And as I stood there, watching the quiet settle around me like armor, I realized something even bigger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared to stand up for myself. I wasn't scared to let them deal with the consequences of their own choices. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix everything. I was the one watching them fall apart without my help. And that, more than anything, tasted like justice. 2 days after I sent that final email, the one that returned their exact cruelty to them without screaming, without tears. Without a single apology, I heard the sound of the SUV pulling into the driveway long before they opened the front door. I didn't rush to greet them. I didn't even pretend to care. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, sitting at the kitchen island with a plate of leftovers they didn't bother to take on their trip, calmly sipping iced tea like someone who had finally learned the difference between peace and people-pleasing. When the door slammed open, my family stumbled inside, looking sunburned, exhausted, disheveled, and angrier than I had ever seen them. My mom stormed ahead of everyone else, her beach bag still slung over her shoulder like she was ready to weaponize it. "Emily," she snapped, voice cracking with outrage, "how could you do this to us? We slept in the car, in 90-degree heat. Do you have any idea what you put us through?" I looked up slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her feel the weight of her own hypocrisy. "You told me I wasn't invited," I said plainly. "So I acted accordingly." The words hung in the air like smoke. My dad stepped forward next, slamming his palm against the table so hard my fork rattled. "Don't play games," he barked. "That Airbnb was our plan. That was our family vacation." "No," I corrected, my voice smooth and steady, the calmest I had ever heard myself sound in their presence. "That reservation was mine. My account. My card. My money. My responsibility." Which meant I also had every right to cancel. You excluded me, so I excluded myself completely. For once, my siblings didn't smirk or pile on. They hovered in the doorway, awkward and guilty, shifting their weight from foot to foot like children caught stealing candy. My younger sister wouldn't even meet my eyes. My older brother swallowed hard, his sunburned face blotchy with embarrassment. They had never expected consequences. They had never imagined a version of me who didn't roll over and comply. My mom tried again, her voice wobbling between anger and fake softness. "Family doesn't do things like this," she insisted, as though the words alone corrected the past week of betrayal. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Exactly," I said. "So maybe ask yourself why I finally did." Their silence was deafening. I looked each of them in the eye slowly, deliberately finally realizing something I should have understood years ago. I had spent my entire life begging these people to see my worth when all they ever saw was my usefulness. And that realization lit something inside me, something fierce and liberating. "I'm done," I told them, my voice steady and firm. "I'm done being the family servant. I'm done paying, fixing, covering, bending, and apologizing. If you don't value me, you don't get to use me. I won't be your wallet. I won't be your safety net. I won't be your emotional punching bag. Not anymore." My dad's jaw tightened. My mom's face fell. My siblings exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them spoke. Because they had nothing, absolutely nothing, that could counter what I had just said. They knew it. I knew it. And for the first time, they felt what I had felt for years, the discomfort of being on the outside of someone's boundary. After that day, I didn't slam doors or make dramatic speeches. I didn't seek revenge through chaos. My revenge was quieter, softer, and infinitely more powerful. I simply stopped showing up for people who never showed up for me. Over the next month, I became a different version of myself, still me, but no longer depleted, no longer desperate for approval. I got quieter, but not in the defeated way they were used to. I became quiet in a peaceful, self-contained way. I stopped attending family dinners where I was always expected to cook, yet never thanked. I stopped answering every call that demanded help but never offered support. I stopped letting guilt dictate my decisions. And slowly, something shifted inside the house. They weren't used to a version of me with boundaries. They weren't used to a version of me who said no. They weren't used to a version of me who treated myself with the respect they had always denied me. One morning, I stood on my small balcony with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise turn the sky pink and gold. I thought about the Florida sunlight they stole from me, the vacation I paid for but never got, and instead of feeling bitterness, I smiled because I had used my refunded money on something better, a trip just for myself. A trip where no one could exclude me, silence me, or guilt trip me. I booked a solo getaway to San Diego, a room overlooking the ocean. Long boardwalk walks, seafood dinners, quiet mornings with salty breeze, and absolutely no expectations placed on me. The kind of peace I had begged for my whole life. The kind of peace I was finally giving myself. My parents noticed the change. My siblings felt it. They tried to ask me for small favors again, rides, money, errands, but I answered with the one word I rarely used before, no. And every time I said it, I felt myself becoming lighter, freer, stronger. I realized that they didn't have power over me. I had simply been handing it to them for years. And now I wasn't. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need them to finally treat me right. Because the truth hit me one afternoon as I packed for my San Diego trip. They tried to break me, but all they did was teach me how to live without them. And that, I realized with a deep breath of fresh, liberated air, was the sweetest revenge of all.